Hello everybody, how are you doing? Oh, excuse me, I'll just get that at a better angle, I think. Oh, my goodness, my phone's talking to me. I'm sure I turned that off. Try that again. Try and get this camera at a better angle. I know what I can do this. Just means dragging the actual camera placement on the overlay down. Right, that's better. Slightly breathless because I've just charged up the stairs to my office because I got caught up in a phone call right when I was wanting to come upstairs, but it was one of those, I have to take the phone call and find out what's going on and if it's something I need to do something about right now or if it can wait until a bit later, which it was, thankfully. And yes, I just checked, my microphone is going, so we're all good with that. Okay, where are we up to? We're reading about the third book of we're reading the third book of adventures of the children and the Samoyed, and they found him at a pet shop, they rescued him, they've been back to ancient Egypt and to ancient Babylon, I guess, and just got home safely. So I'm guessing we're going to find out what was happening with the other children in the family while some of them were being held captive. Yes, we'll find out what happened, I think, today, and then see what happens, because it's got a rather intriguing chapter title. I'll just open my ebook. Sorry about that. I read from an old first generation iPad mini that was a hand-me-down, which I love very much because I like the fact that it's not being put into a trash heap or said that it's being recycled but not actually being recycled, just because that's often the way it goes. They say, oh yes, we recycle all the electronics, and then you see pictures of places where electronics are being dumped, piled up in refuse tips because people have no use for the parts because they're too old or whatever like that, and it costs too much to actually disassemble them to remake into other things often. Not that that always happens, but that does actually happen more than I would like it to. So I'm very happy to actually save a piece of technology from going to the rubbish. So here we go. Okay, I'm going to start reading the chapter in a minute, but I'm just going to explain. First of all, the intriguing thing was that the chapter is called The Queen in London. And I don't think that's going to be the Queen of England, because at this stage it was the current Queen of England's father who was king, I think, at the time. So that's George VI, not Elizabeth II, who is in the middle of having her platinum jubilee, I think it is, 75 years on the throne, something humongous, huge, might be 70 years, probably more likely 70 years. She's been ruling as queen for a very long time, thankfully not having to do quite the range of things that they used to do in the old days. So, the essentials. I will introduce you to me, for those of you who are new here. Hi, I'm Jev. I read old children's books. At the moment, most of the books I read are actually ebooks on my iPad mini, just because the rest of my books, most of my books, are still in boxes. But when I do actually read from physical books rather than digital books, they tend to be ones that look a little bit like this, where they've got shiny bits in the titles, and it's printed on the cover, and it's a hardback, and it's got yellowed pages, and when you run your hand over the page, often you can actually feel the indentations from the printing that was done. And if it has illustrations, it will often look something like this style of illustrations, where it is done as an etching, which is where they have scratched lines onto a base material of some sort, often metal, and then they will rub ink over that, and then they'll just to squish it down into the scratches. They'll wipe off the excess ink, so you only have the stuff that's on the lines and the scratches and texturing, and then they will put that into a printing press with the the page that's going to be printed, the piece of paper that's going to be printed, and squish it really, 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 really hard, and then the paper holds on to the ink more than the metal plate does, and the ink transfers to the paper, the ink has to dry, blah, 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 blah. So very labour-intensive process to print books, especially in the old days. Now, that particular book was gifted to my great-great-uncle, great-great-uncle, I think. Or was it great-great-great-uncle? In 1897, which means the book was printed in 1897 or before. And I have a feeling it was probably before then, because in those days they would print a batch of books and then they'd send some off to the different bookshops that were requesting them, and then the rest would sit in storage until they needed more of them, because it was much more complicated to reassemble all the hardware needed to actually do the printing, the type, to typeset it, than it was to actually print off more than you need and store the excess until they were required. Just that's the way it was. Whereas now there's a lot of things there are a lot of books that are print on demand books, which means that there is no such thing as a first edition really anymore if it's a print on demand style of book, and they just print the copies as people want them. So bookshops will order them, so they will be printed for the bookshops and sent out to the bookshop. Otherwise, people will order them through somewhere like Amazon or something like that, and then Amazon will have a copy printed for you and sent to you. Did you know that? That's often how book publishing works these days. Quite different. It would have blown their minds what we can do with computers, if the people who were doing it in these old-fashioned ways. Anyway, so I'm Jev. I read old children's books. And most of the books I read originally were something like that style of production. I have occasionally read out loud online other books that are physical books like that, and I will read more in the future. But for now, we read ebooks, and they are all public domain ebooks. That means they're no longer within copyright. So I'm not actually stealing somebody else's profit from a book. These are all fully legally available, and there's actually a group of us who read public domain books online, on Twitch specifically. Some, like me, will also put the videos from when we've read the books over onto YouTube. And the group that I'm part of that does that is called Codex. You'll find a series of links down below my video panel here on Twitch that has information about Codex with links to the different Codex readers that are currently in our group. And most of the readers actually read books that are written for adults and sometimes books written for children, whereas I only read books that are written for children. But I will also give you a link for Codex's Discord server. Sorry, just making sure I type it properly. So please, if you're interested in hearing more old books, then go over there. Join the Discord server, get into conversation with the others. There's a book club that we do where there will be an online reading of certain portions of a book by the different readers in the group, but everybody else will also be reading the book themselves, and then discussions. Sometimes, and those discussions are often done as part of a live stream. So you'll be watching someone who's part of the group and several others. There'll be talking heads on your screen, and you can type into chat to get involved with the discussion about the book for the different aspects that we're talking about. They also have a movie club, which I haven't seen happening yet, but I'm pretty sure it has. I just didn't know it was going on. There are some aspects of Discord I'm still finding my way around. Anyway, I do have my own Discord server, but it's super quiet. I almost go as far as saying it's the quietest one on Discord, but maybe not. We go through phases with it. Sometimes I remember to post the illustrations from books that we're currently reading over there. Sometimes it can be a few months afterwards that I put them there. And also people can make suggestions for different books that they would like read, as long as they're public domain ones. You can suggest other ones, but I'm not going to read them if they're not public domain, or if I don't specifically have express permission from the publisher or author to read it. I am not going to be breaking any copyright laws. Just because if I was writing a book, I wouldn't like somebody else to be taking the kudos for it being available and me not getting anything out of it, because it's a lot of work involved in writing and editing and publishing a book. So I think they need to be rewarded for that. I'm not prepared to take that from them. And no, me reading it is not actually going to give them lots of publicity, so don't even bother trying that. I mean, if you do a job like laying bricks for somebody and somebody says, oh, well, I'll just tell all my friends about it rather than paying you for it, that way you'll get some publicity. As a bricklayer, are you going to be happy with that? Is that going to feed your children? Didn't think so. Anyway, let's get on with it. I'm Jev. I read old books. I've done that bit. I've told you about the sort of books I read. They're children's books and they're public domain. I've also told you about Codex. I do have 3 tips before we get on with reading, and the first is make sure you've got something handy to drink. Second one is make sure you've got something handy to snack on, because it's always a lot more fun if you've got something to eat and drink while you're listening. And the third one is make sure you've got somewhere comfortable to sit, just because it's a lot more fun to be able to just sit back and enjoy it, unless of course you're having to do some work like job work or housework or homework for school or studies, in which case that's fine. You can carry on. I will natter away to you in the background. I will give you a little bit of a warning that I have a tendency to get a little bit distracted from time to time. I've got an ADHD sort of brain where my brain will supply all sorts of information about something that we've read, and for some reason I feel the need to tell you all about it, which I used to feel awkward about that, but I don't now, because I realise that a lot of the things that I share about to do with the stories we're reading are things that other people aren't aware of. I've got a different range of life experience. I've lived in small boats. I've lived in sort of like little cottage shack type places that don't have running water, or if it is, it's only gravity feed water, no flushing toilet, no electricity. I've lived on the other side of the world. I've travelled and visited places that are way hotter than what most of us ever experience just for their normal summertime temperatures, and way colder than what most of us experience for their winter temperatures. Although I wasn't there in winter, I was only there in summer, and they were amazed at how well we coped. I couldn't have done it now. Seriously, it would have been way too hot for me. Anyway, so I've got a lot of life experience, and also I've spent a lot of time with older relatives. We used to live next door to one set of my grandparents. At another time, we actually lived with another one of my sets of grandparents. I have extra bits in my family, so I talk about it like people have more than 2 sets of grandparents. Well, actually, some of us do. I've also spent a lot of time with my great aunt and uncle, who lived in China for 7 years before it was a communist country. So I've heard all sorts of stories about what it was like to live there at the time from someone who lived there and experienced it, someone who was actually fluent in Chinese, who had worked over there for a time, because generally if you're 7 years within a country, you do get a little bit familiar with what it's like and how it functions. So yeah, quite a wide range of life experience, and all of these things that I've experienced and the fact that I love finding out about things all add to when I read a story. So I'll be reading, fine, we'll get deeply embedded in the story, and then suddenly I'll give you a bit of extra information which you may not have known about, and it may actually help you to understand the story better. Or at least, even if it doesn't for you, it might do for somebody else. So how about we get on with the story, hey? Good plan, eh? I'll just check this, and yes, from time to time you'll see me looking across at my other monitor just to see if there's anything going on over there to do with me reading to you that I might be having to deal with. So I've got my drink handy. I've got my homemade iced coffee today. It's a double shot of espresso with a tiny little bit of sugar in the bottom and just topped up with cold milk. I've also got water, just in case you're worried that I'm having too much caffeine. I wouldn't want you too worried about it. You don't need to send a rescue crowd or anything like that, rescue team. So let's get on with reading. We're reading The Story of the Amulet by Edith Nesbit, and we are reading Chapter 8, The Queen in London. Sorry. And you will from time to time hear a little bit of extra noise here. Sometimes it's me typing on my keyboard, as you heard just before. It goes thunk, thunk, thunk. just because I haven't got a proper microphone stand yet. That'll happen one day. Or you'll hear the noise in the chimney. Sometimes if it's a rainy day, you'll actually hear the noise of the rain hitting the chimney. Sometimes you'll actually hear the fan from my computer. All sorts of things. Or the lawnmower guy. Or someone chopping firewood. Or loading the fireplace with fire because we're going into winter here now. Things like that. So we'll see how it go. But yeah, odd noises, that's okay. It's all part of I describe the way I read as being more like bedtime stories or story time at school, where there would be someone asking questions and someone wiggling around and trying to get comfortable and that sort of stuff, rather than audiobook style stories. Oh, just regarding audiobooks, some of our codex readers do that for a living. So we've got a really wide variety of readers, and they're high quality readers too. I just don't have the skills for that, nor do I have the patience, but that's fine. So some of them, we've got school teachers, we've got audiobook readers, we've got people who do voice acting and normal acting, and then you have people like me who just do normal stuff based from home and a small office or things like that. Such a wide variety. So let's get on with reading today's story, which I've already told you what it is. The Story of the Amulet by Edith Nesbit, Chapter 8, The Queen of London. The Queen in London. Now, tell us what happened to you, said Cyril to Jane, when he and the others had told her all about the Queen's talk and the banquet, and the variety entertainment, carefully stopping short before the beginning of the dungeon part of the story, because they didn't want Jane worried about doing some more time travelling, which is what they're actually doing, if she heard about what happened with them getting put into the dungeon. So they're just carefully not mentioning that to her, because she's already very nervous about it. She didn't want to go back to Egypt again because of the fact that the village that they ended up in was attacked by people from another village with real weapons and all sorts of things like that. And she didn't want to go back there, and she was quite adamant about it. In fact, she didn't want to do any more travelling using the it's not a token. Anyway, the thing that's meant to be helping them to find the amulet. And so they're being careful because they don't want to scare her off, because she is the youngest of the four of them. There are 5 children in the family, but the other one is even younger again, preschool age, and away with mother because mother has been ill and so she needs rest. Anyway, the children are staying with their old nurse, the lady who used to look after them when they were little. And they are trying to be responsible and careful with their youngest sister, Jane. It wasn't much good going, said Jane, if you didn't even try to get the amulet, because they hadn't. She had ended up staying with the... No, she didn't. She had ended up going with the Samoyed. That's what happened. We found out it was a no-go, said Cyril. It's not to be got in Babylon. It was lost before that. We'll go to some other jolly friendly place where everyone is kind and pleasant and look for it there. Now, tell us your part. Oh, said Jane, the Queen's man with the smooth face, what was his name? Ritti Marduk, said Cyril. Yes, said Jane, Ritti Marduk. He came for me just after the Samoyed had bitten the guard of the gate's wife's little boy, and he took me to the palace, and we had supper with the new little queen from Egypt. She is a dear, not much older than you. She told me heaps about Egypt, and we played ball after supper, because they were in Babylon, and they were with, the other children were with the first queen of this current king of Babylon, who has been away and has gone off to get his next wife, because it was a way of forming diplomatic relations or something like this with other countries. And so his latest wife was this young queen from Egypt. She is a dear, not much older than you. She told me heaps about Egypt, and we played ball after supper, and then the Babylon queen sent for me. I liked her too. And she talked to the Samoyed, and I went to sleep. And then you woke me up. That's all. The Samoyed, roused from its sound sleep, told the same story. But, it added, what possessed you to tell that queen that I could give wishes? I sometimes think you were born without even the most rudimentary imitation of brains. The children did not know the meaning of rudimentary, but it sounded a rude, insulting word. I don't see that we did any harm, said Cyril sulkily. Oh no, said the Psammead with withering irony. Not at all, of course not. Quite the contrary, exactly so. Only she happened to wish that she might soon find herself in your country, and soon may mean at any moment. Then it's your fault, said Robert, because you might just as well have made soon mean some moment next year or next century. That's where you, as so often happens, make the mistake, rejoined the Sand Fairy. I couldn't mean anything but what she meant by soon. It wasn't my wish. And what she meant was the next time the king happens to go out lion hunting, so she'll have a whole day and perhaps two to do as she wishes with. She doesn't know about time only being in a mode of thought. About time being in a mode of thought. Well, said Cyril, with a sigh of resignation, we must do what we can to give her a jolly time. She was jolly decent to us. I say, suppose we were to go to St. James Park after dinner and feed those ducks that we never did feed. After all that Babylon and all those years ago, I feel as if I should like to see something real. And now. You'll come, Psammead? Where's my priceless woven basket of sacred rushes? Asked the Psammead morosely. I can't go out with nothing on, and I won't, what's more. And then everybody remembered with pain that the bass bag, it was a bag used for carrying bass fish, had, in the hurry of departure from Babylon, not been remembered. But it's not so extra precious, said Robert hastily. You can get them given to you for nothing if you buy fish at Farringdon Market. Oh, said the Psammead, very crossly indeed. So you presume on my sublime indifference to the things of this disgusting modern world to fob me off with a travelling equipage that costs you nothing. Very well, I shall go to Sand. Please don't wake me. So when he wants to have some quiet time, like you or I would go to bed, he goes to Sand. And they have a box full of sand for him. Nice sand. Clean sand. Anyway. And it went there, then and there to Sand, that it being the Psammead, which, as you know, meant to bed. The boys went to St. James Park to feed the ducks, but they went alone. Hi, Ken. How are you? Good to have you here. Ken's one of the people in... My brain is doing a little bit of a hiccup here. Ken is one of the readers in Codex, and I'm just going to give you his link so that you can go and follow him and subscribe to him and listen to him when he's reading. He's a great reader. Copy link address. Here we have... Oh, actually, I did the wrong thing, didn't I? Yes, great to have another Codex member here. Yes, I got it right. I didn't need to go and find the right link because it was going to give it to me as long as I spelt your name correctly. So, yeah, Ken is another one of our Codex readers, and I would love it if you would go to his Twitch channel and follow him, and if you can, subscribe to him, and all of those things. Make sure that you go and listen to him when he's reading a book. It's lots of fun just to go and listen. It's lovely to have stories read to you. What are you reading at the moment, Ken? Can you say? I can't remember. I'm terrible at remembering things. Oh, thank you for saying that. I enjoy reading. I think that really makes a difference. And for those of you who are watching on YouTube, you're missing out on a lot. Come on over to Twitch, and there's a link on my YouTube channel for my Twitch channel, and you can listen to stories when I'm reading them actually live and actually partake in, over there, in the chat as I'm talking. So you're reading Astonishing Tales. That's right. I'd forgotten that. Sorry. Anyway, so when recently, I think you were reading just before, weren't you? A bit earlier on today, because Ken, I think, is in North America. and so therefore it's evening for him now. It's afternoon here in New Zealand. So I'm going to carry on reading, but I'm so glad that you're here. It's wonderful. Sorry. So we've got the boys have gone off to the park to go and feed the ducks because they want a bit of just sort of like normal present day stuff to be involved with. And we don't know when this queen is going to arrive. I was wondering how it had that for the chapter title. So you've just finished Herman Melville's Bartleby. That's right, for the book club. Yes, I'm going to see if I can actually sort of watch the chat and be involved with the chat, but I haven't actually read it yet, so we'll just have to wait and see. But I've got a bit of time because it's not till July that we've got the next get together for that. Right, sorry, I'm going to carry on with the reading because I lose my way on the page very, very easily, as anyone else who's watched me regularly reading will attest to. So the boys went to St. James Park to feed the ducks, but they went alone, which means they had themselves but nobody else. They didn't have the girls with them or the Samoyed. Anthea and Jane sat sewing all the afternoon. They cut off half a yard from each of their best green Liberty sashes. Now, I'm trying to think, I'm pretty sure that Liberty's has been mentioned in one of the previous chapters. Liberty's was a fabric and homewares shop in London. I say was, but it actually still is. Now, the premises that they use for most of their retail these days is around the corner from where the original one was around the time period that these books were written. But the shop that I've been to, the sort of stuff that they stock is very similar to what they used to then, except that it was a different style at the time. Very fancy, quite ornate fabrics and things like this without necessarily being all gilt and that sort of fancy, but lots of floral patterns on them and things like this. Furnishing fabrics, curtains. I've got some secondhand curtains that were actually made out of Liberty fabric. And somebody looked at them and said, wow, where did you get those from? Because we don't have that sort of thing here in New Zealand. We don't have a Liberty shop in New Zealand. But they also did homewares. And actually, I'm pretty sure they still do. I remember getting some embroidery scissors for my mother when I visited to have a look what it's like. And it's a mock Tudor building, but it's done very much, at least on the outside, a lot more accurately mock Tudor style. That's the white plaster work and the black beam work. A lot more accurately that style than a lot of the other things that you see around. It's wonderful. Crowded with stuff. And then in the era that the children were there, they used to import home decor items from other countries, like what was for them modern Egypt, modern Middle Eastern countries, places like that, India, all sorts, China, I think, all sorts of things that otherwise you wouldn't have in London. So it was a way of having all these things that seemed so very exotic, but in amongst it was fabric. That has been a core part of what they do, is dressmaking fabric and also furnishing fabric. So when it says here that the girls cut half a yard from each of their best green Liberty sashes, then that's half a yard of fabric. That's 1.5 feet, half a metre. It's about this big. And it's probably quite expensive fabric. It's probably the sash is probably meant to be used when they're wearing their best clothes. And so they've each taken half a yard or half a metre off the end of one of their sashes, and I think they're going to make something with it. So let's carry on and find out. A towel cut in two formed a lining, and they sat and sewed and sewed and sewed. What they were making was a bag for the Samoyed. Each worked at a half of the bag. Jane's half had four-leaved shamrocks embroidered on it. They were the only things she could do because she had been taught how at school, and fortunately some of the silk she had been taught with was left over. Now, silk was the type of thread that you used for embroidery for this sort of thing. And even so, Anthea had to draw the pattern for her for the shamrocks. Anthea's side of the bag had letters on it, worked hastily but affectionately in chain stitch. They were something like this, and I'm going to show you the picture So the reason why the letters on it look bobbly is because it's chain stitch. So chain stitch is where the needle comes up, goes around the back of the previous stitch, and then goes back down the same place. And then you go underneath, and then you come up, go round the bottom of the previous stitch, back to where you came up, and then back down. And so it forms these loops, which is why these have this texture. And it says Sam's Travel Car, and we're going to find out why. Even so, Anthea had to draw the pattern for her. Anthea's side of the bag had letters on it, worked hastily but affectionately in chain stitch. They were something like this. She would have put travelling carriage, but she made the letters too big, so there was no room. The bag was made into a bag with old nurse's sewing machine. Old nurse is the lady that they stay with, because she used to be there, what they used to call a nursemaid, someone who would look after children when they were young. And the strings of it were Anthea's and Jane's best red hair ribbons. So it's a green bag from the sash with embroidery on it, and then red hair ribbons, and it's been sewn together on nurse's sewing machine. I wonder if it's a crank one or if it's a treadle one. I have an old sewing machine. A bit older than this, a bit newer than this. Their sewing machine would have been a lot older than the one I use, but mine's still pretty old. At tea time, when the boys had come home with a most unfavourable report of the St. James Park ducks, Anthea ventured to awaken the Psammead and to show it its new travelling bag, which they've put a lot of effort into. Now I'm just going to see where St. James Park is. Yes, my keyboard is clattering away in your ears. And I'm guessing it's at the centre of St. James Square. And we are going to also find out where Fitzroy Street is. Fitzroy Street, London. Okay. I'm going to turn on my map, which is this one here. There we go. Now, enable preview. That's it. That's the thing I need. Where is it? Come on. Not quite sure why it's not giving it to me. I'll try again. No. Odd. I've had it before and it worked before. Okay, I'm going to zoom in here, find the link for it, and put it in there instead. Teach it a lesson. I got it to work last time, and I don't know what's happening this time. Nope. Interact. There's an interact button. And I discover that every time. So here you go. This is where the children are staying. This street that runs down here is Fitzroy Street. That's in London. Now I'm going to zoom out and you can see that this is in London. See, there it is. London. There's the main central part here in London. And this is where the children are staying. And St. James Park. Let's see if we can find it on here. Don't think it's that St. James Park. Let's try the other one. St. James Park. No, that's Russell Square. Where's Fitzroy? Now I've gone and lost Fitzroy. Anyway, it's somewhere there, and I'm going to take that all away and turn it off because it's just confusing. It's confusing me. I'm sorry. You can look it up yourself, and you can see if you can figure out which one is the right one for St. James Park. I'm guessing it's one that they could walk to reasonably easily. So I don't think it's the one that the computer is currently showing me, because that's a very long way away. No, it would not be. I'm pretty sure that it's meant to be the park that the children walked down the road to from Nurse's house previously. Maybe it's got a different name now, and so therefore Google Maps doesn't know what to show me. Ah, well, doesn't matter. We'll carry on. We'll carry on reading. I just thought it was some information that I actually had easy access to, but I don't. At tea time, when the boys had come home with a most unfavourable report of the St. James Park ducks, Anthea ventured to awaken the Samoyed and to show it its new travelling bag. Huh, it said, sniffing a little contemptuously, yet at the same time affectionately. It's not so dusty. The Samoyed seemed to pick up very easily for the kind of things that people said nowadays. For a creature that had in its time associated with megatheriums and pterodactyls, its quickness was really wonderful. It's more worthy of me, it said, than the kind of bag that's given away with a pound of plaice being a type of flatfish that you buy from the fish market. When do you propose to take me out in it? I should like to take a rest from taking you or us anywhere, said Cyril, but Jane said, I want to go to Egypt. I did like that Egyptian princess that came to marry the king in Babylon. She told me about the larks they have in Egypt, and the cats. Oh, do let's go there. And I told her what the bird things on the amulet were like, and she said it was Egyptian writing. The others exchanged looks of silent rejoicing at the thought of their cleverness in having concealed from Jane the terrors they had suffered in the dungeon below the Euphrates. Egypt's so nice too, Jane went on, because of Dr. Brewer's scripture history. I would like to go there. When Joseph was dreaming those curious dreams, or when Moses was doing wonderful things with snakes and sticks. I don't know that it would have actually been that nice about then. I don't care about snakes, said Anthea, shuddering. Well, we needn't be in that part, but Babylon was lovely. We had cream and sweets, sticky stuff, and sweet sticky stuff, and I expect Egypt's the same. There was a good deal of discussion, but it all ended in everyone's agreeing to Jane's idea, and next morning, directly after breakfast, which was kippers, and very nice, if you like kippers or other seafood. Some of us don't. Kippers are flattened, dried, and I think smoked fish of a particular variety, which some of us don't do well with. But apparently it was a very traditional English breakfast, and they liked it. So that's good. They enjoyed it. Nice solid breakfast. The Samoyed was invited to go into his travelling carriage. The moment after it had done so, with stiff, furry reluctance like that of a cat when you want to cuddle it, and its ideas are not the same as yours, old Nurse came in. Well, chickies, she said, are you feeling very dull? Oh, no, Nurse dear, said Anthea. We're having a lovely time. We're just going off to see some old ancient relics. Ah, said old Nurse, the Royal Academy, I suppose. Don't go wasting your money too reckless, that's all. She cleared away the kipper's bones and the tea things, and when she had swept up the crumbs and removed the cloth, the amulet was held up and the order given. This is obviously after she's left the room. Just as the Duchess and other people gave it to their coachman, giving the order to go somewhere. To Egypt, please, said Anthea when Cyril had uttered the wonderful name of power. When Moses was there, added Jane. I was just going to say, which time in Egypt were they going to go to? And there in the dingy Fitzroy Street dining room the amulet grew big, and it was an arch, and through it they saw a blue, blue sky and a running river. No, stop, said Cyril, and pulled down Jane's hand with the amulet in it. What silly cuckoos we all are, he said. Of course we can't go. We daren't leave home for a single minute now for fear that minute should be the minute. What minute be what minute? Asked Jane impatiently, trying to get her hand away from Cyril. The minute when the Queen of Babylon comes, said Cyril. And then everyone saw it. Everyone understood. For some days life flowed in a very slow, dusty, uneventful stream. The children could never go out all at once because they never knew when the King of Babylon would go out lion hunting and leave his queen free to pay them that surprise visit to which she was, without doubt, eagerly looking forward to. Sorry, I'll just have a drink of water. So they took it in turns, 2 and 2, to go out and stay in. The stay-at-homes would have been much duller than they were, but for the new interest taken in them by the learned gentleman. He called Anthea in one day to show her a beautiful necklace of purple and gold beads. I saw one like that, she said, in the British Museum, perhaps, he said. I like to call the place where I saw it Babylon, said Anthea, cautiously. A pretty fancy, said the learned gentleman, and quite correct too, because, as a matter of fact, these beads did come from Babylon. The other 3 were all out that day. The boys had been going to the zoo, and Jane had said so plaintively, I'm sure I'm fonder of rhinoceroses than either of you are, that Anthea had told her to run along with them. And she had run, catching the boys before that part of the road where Fitzroy Street suddenly becomes Fitzroy Square. That one I know, Fitzroy Square. Let's find that. Let's see if I can actually find the place again. Interact. That's the one. There's a St. James Park. Oh. Let's type in here. What did I say that it was the St. James Park? Oh, there. Up there, north of Hyde Park. We are looking for Fitzroy Street, aren't we? Fitzroy Street is there. And this will be the park that I was looking for is probably the one that was over here that we looked at. Sorry, I'll just move this out of the way. I'm in the way. I'll get this out of the way. So that's Hyde Park, and I had spotted a St. James Park somewhere up here near Regent's Park and Primrose Hill and all that sort of stuff. And then the place that the children are staying is over here at Fitzroy Street. So that's more realistic, that that's the place that they would have gone. So if I zoom into Fitzroy Street here, so they're walking along the road until they get to till Fitzroy Street becomes Fitzroy Square, which is this bit here, which it actually has now. It has a garden in the middle. I don't know that it did at the time when the children were there. And the zoo that they went to could well have been this one here, the London Zoo in Regent's Park. And yes, I have been there. Have you? It was quite intriguing. My husband actually did some building work there at one stage. So it's not so far from where the children are living to be able to walk up here and up here and up here and up here. But they may have also caught a bus, I don't know, or something like that. So I'm just going to pop that one out of the way for now, and we'll carry on reading, find out what happens. And so she had run and caught the boys before that part of the road where Fitzroy Street suddenly becomes Fitzroy Square. I think Babylon is most frightfully interesting, said Anthea to the old gentleman. I do have such interesting dreams about it, at least not dreams exactly, but quite as wonderful. because she's trying to say it in such a way where she can talk about where she's been with the old gentleman, where he will accept what she's talking about as being just from the imagination of a child, even if it's actually accurate because she's been there. "Do sit down and tell me," said he. So she sat down and told, and he asked her a lot of questions, and she answered them as well as she could. "Wonderful, wonderful," he said at last. "One's heard of thought transference, but I never thought I had any power of that sort. Yet it must be that, and very bad for you, I should think. Doesn't your head ache very much?" He suddenly put a cold, thin hand to her forehead, reached out and touched her forehead just to see if she was feeling too hot, because he thought her imaginary tales of Babylon were because he was thinking about it. Didn't have a clue that it was because she's been there. "No, thank you," she said, "not at all. I assure you it is not done intentionally," he went on. "Of course I know a good deal about Babylon, and I unconsciously communicate it to you. You've heard of thought reading, but some of the things you say I don't understand. They never enter my head, and yet they're so astoundingly probable." "It's all right," said Anthea reassuringly. "I understand, and don't worry, it's all quite simple, really." It was not quite so simple when Anthea, having heard the others come in, went down, and before she had had time to ask how they had liked the zoo, heard a noise outside, compared to which the wild beasts' noises were as gentle as singing birds. "Uh-oh." "Good gracious," said Anthea, "what's that?" The loud hum of many voices came through the open window. Words could be distinguished. "Here's a guy. This ain't November. That ain't no guy. It's a ballet lady. That's what it is. Not it. It's a bloomin' loony, I tell ya." Then came a clear voice that they knew. "Retire, slaves," it said. "What's she a-sayin' of?" cried a dozen voices. "Some blamed foreign lingo," one voice replied. The children rushed to the door. A crowd was on the road and pavement. In the middle of the crowd, plainly to be seen from the top of the steps, were the beautiful face and bright veil of the Babylonian queen. "Jiminy!" cried Robert, and ran down the steps. "Here she is! Here!" he cried. "Look out! Let the lady past! She's a friend of ours coming to see us." "Nice friend for a respectable house," snorted a fat woman with marrows on a handcart. Obviously someone who sells vegetables, I suppose. All the same, the crowd made way a little. The Queen met Robert on the pavement, and Cyril joined them, the Psammead bag still on his arm. "Here," he whispered, "here's the Psammead. You can get wishes." "I wish you'd come in a different dress, if you had to come," said Robert, "but it's no use my wishing anything." "No," said the Queen, "I wish I was dressed." "No, I don't. I wish they were dressed properly. Then they wouldn't be so silly." The Psammead blew itself out till the bag was a very tight fit for it, and suddenly every man, woman, and child in that crowd felt that it had not enough clothes on. For, of course, the Queen's idea of proper dress was the dress that had been proper for the working classes 3,000 years ago in Babylon. That's right. I'm just going to see if I can find the right picture for you, because I'm going to be showing it to you very shortly, and I need to make sure it's going to be the right size too, so it'll fit on the screen. Otherwise you won't be able to see most of it. So, the Queen's idea of proper dress was the dress that had been proper for the working classes 3,000 years ago in Babylon, and there was not much of it. "Lawky me," said the marrow-selling woman, "whatever could have took me to come out this figure?" And she wheeled her cart away very quickly. Indeed, "Someone's made a pretty guy of you. Talk of guys," said the man who sold bootlaces. "Why don't you talk?" said the man next to him. "Look at your own silly legs. And where's your boots?" "I never come out like this. I'll take my sacred oath. In other words, I don't normally dress like this. Here they are." dressed more the way the Queen of Babylon would have expected to see the working classes dressed. Not the hats and stuff like that, but these sort of like wrap type robes. And bare feet. Not the way they're normally dressed. I never come out like this. I take my sacred, said the bootlace seller. That's what these are, hanging off the tray and off the side of his sash. I wasn't quite myself last night, I'll own, but not to dress up like a circus. The crowd was all talking at once and getting rather angry, but no one seemed to think of blaming the Queen. Wouldn't have occurred to them, but they would have been a little bit disconcerted to find themselves dressed like that. Anthea bounded down the steps and pulled her up. The others followed and the door was shut. Blowed if I can make it out, they heard. I'm off home, I am. And the crowd, coming slowly to the same mind, dispersed, followed by another crowd of persons who were not dressed in what the Queen thought was the proper way. We shall have the police here directly, said Anthea in tones of despair. Oh, why did you come dressed like that? The Queen leaned against the arm of the horsehair sofa. How else can a queen dress, I should like to know, she questioned. Our Queen wears things like other people, said Cyril. Well, I don't, and I must say, she remarked in an injured tone, that you don't seem very glad to see me now I have come. But perhaps it's the surprise that makes you behave like this. Yet you ought to be used to surprises, the way you vanished. I shall never forget it. The best magic I've ever seen. How did you do it? Oh, never mind about that now, said Robert. You see, you've gone and upset all those people, and I expect they'll fetch the police, and we don't want to see you collared and put in prison. You can't put queens in prison, she said loftily. Oh, can't you, said Cyril. We cut off a king's head here once. In this miserable room? How frightfully interesting. No, not in this room, in history. Oh, that, said the Queen disparagingly. I thought you'd done it with your own hands. The girls shuddered. What a hideous city yours is, the Queen went on pleasantly, like this is just normal conversation. And what horrid, ignorant people. Do you know they actually can't understand a single word I say? Can you understand them? Asked Jane. Of course not. They speak some vulgar northern dialect. I can understand you quite well. I really am not going to explain again, this is the story writer, not going to explain again how it was that the children could understand other languages than their own so thoroughly, and talk them too, so that it felt and sounded to them just as though they were talking English. Well, said Cyril bluntly, now you've seen just how horrid it is, don't you think you might as well go home again? Well, I've seen simply nothing yet, said the Queen, arranging her starry veil. I wished to be at your door, and I was. Now I must go and see your king and queen. Nobody's allowed to, said Anthea in haste. But look here, we'll take you and show you anything you'd like to see, anything you can see. She added kindly, because she remembered how nice the Queen had been to them in Babylon, even if she had been a little deceitful in the matter of Jane and the Psammead. There's the museum, said Cyril hopefully. There are lots of things from your country there, if only we could disguise you a little. I know, said Anthea suddenly. Mother's old theatre cloak, and there are a lot of her old hats in the big box. The blue silk, lace-trimmed cloak did indeed hide some of the Queen's startling splendours, but the hat fitted very badly. Sorry, I can't actually find where I was. The hat fitted very badly. It had pink roses in it, and there was something about the coat or the hat or the Queen that made her look somehow not very respectable. Oh, never mind, said Anthea, when Cyril whispered this. The thing is to get her out before Nurse has finished her 40 winks. I should think she's got about to the 39th wink by now. Come on then, said Robert. You know how dangerous it is. Let's make haste into the museum. If any of those people you made guys of do fetch the police, they won't think of looking for you there. That's a good point. Actually, no, not that. Not that. This one. The British Museum. That's the one I want. interact, find the tab British Museum. Ah, there it is. So, I didn't think we'd moved that. Oh, that's that. Okay. I'm trying to find where the children are again. So there's the British Museum right here. There's Russell Square. And the children are, you can't quite see it. There's St. James Square. I don't know if that's St. James Park. Where is it? I bookmarked it. Why can I not find it? There's Hyde Park. Ah! I'm having such a hard time trying to... No, not that one. Trying to go back to where they were each time. Why is it? I have to type it in every time. Oh, and that's where Liberties of London is. It's up there. And what did we find? The other one that we were looking for was... Okay, so there's the British Museum. Liberties is up there, and the children are over here somewhere, the place that they live at the moment. We'll get that out of the way. It's just annoying me. I should be able to do that very easily and remember and have it actually keep a collection of place marks on there so I can show you and point to the different ones. Anyway, so for some reason, this odd combination of things, as well as the over-the-top clothing that the Queen is wearing, makes her look a little bit odd and not quite appropriate. Not quite so surprising, actually. The police won't think of looking you there at the museum. The blue silk coat and the pink rosed hat attracted almost as much attention as the royal costume had done, because it's not the normal thing that you wear out like that. And the children were uncommonly glad to get out of the noisy streets into the grey quiet of the museum. "Parcels and umbrellas to be left here," said a man at the counter. The party had no umbrellas, and the only parcel was the bag containing the Psammead, which the Queen had insisted should be brought. "I'm not going to be left," said the Psammead softly, "so don't you think it." "I'll wait outside with you," said Anthea hastily, and went to sit on the seat near the drinking fountain. "Don't sit so near that nasty fountain," said the creature crossly. "I might get splashed." Because he gets, I think it can make him very sick or even kill him if he gets wet. Anthea obediently moved to another seat and waited. Indeed, she waited and waited and waited and waited and waited. The Psammead dropped into an uneasy slumber. Anthea had long ceased to watch the swing door that always let out the wrong person, and she was herself almost asleep, and still the others did not come back. It was quite a start when Anthea suddenly realised that they had come back and that they were not alone. Oh dear. Behind them was quite a crowd of men in uniform, and several gentlemen were there. Everyone seemed very angry. "Now go," said the nicest of the angry gentlemen. "Take the poor demented thing home and tell your parents she ought to be properly looked after. If you can't get her to go, we must send for the police," said the nastiest of the gentlemen. "But we don't wish to use harsh measures," added the nice one, who was really very nice indeed and seemed to be over all the others, more senior. "May I speak to my sister a moment first?" asked Robert. The nicest gentleman nodded, and the officials stood around the Queen, the others forming a sort of guard, while Robert crossed over to Anthea. "Everything you can think of," he replied to Anthea's glance of inquiry. "Kicked up the most frightful shine in there. Said those necklaces and earrings and things in the glass cases were all hers. Would have taken them out of the cases. Tried to break the glass. She did break one bit. Everybody in the place has been at her. No good. I only got her out by telling her that was the place where they cut the Queen's heads off."
That was quite clever, actually. Oh, Bobs, what a whacker. You'd have told a whackinger one to get her out. Besides, it wasn't. I meant mummy queens. How do you know they don't cut off mummy queens' heads to see how the embalming is done? So he was kind of, in his mind, finding a way to make it true so he wasn't lying. What I want to say is, can't you get her to go with you quietly? I'll try, said Anthea, and went up to the Queen. Do come home, she said. The learned gentleman in our house has a much nicer necklace than anything they've got here. Come and see it. The Queen nodded. You see, said the nastiest gentleman, she does understand English. I was talking Babylonian, I think, said Anthea bashfully. My good child, said the nice gentleman, what you're talking is not Babylonian, but nonsense. You just go home at once and tell your parents exactly what has happened. Anthea took the Queen's hand and gently pulled her away. The other children followed, and the black crowd of angry gentlemen stood on the steps, watching them. It was when the little party of disgraced children, with the Queen, who had disgraced them, had reached the middle of the courtyard, that her eyes fell on the bag where the Psammead was. She stopped short. I wish, she said very loud and clear, that all those Babylonian things would come out to me here, slowly, so that those dogs and slaves can see the working of the great Queen's magic. Oh, you are a tiresome woman, said the Psammead in its bag, but puffed itself out. Next moment there was a crash. The glass swing doors and all their framework were smashed suddenly and completely. The crowd of angry gentlemen sprang aside when they saw what had done this, but the nastiest of them was not quick enough, and he was roughly pushed out of the way by an enormous stone bull that was floating steadily through the door. It came and stood beside the Queen in the middle of the courtyard. It was followed by some stone images, by great slabs of carved stone, bricks, helmets, tools, weapons, fetters, wine jars, bowls, bottles, vases, jugs, saucers, seals, and the long round things, something like rolling pins with marks on them like the print of little bird feet, necklaces, collars, rings, armlets, earrings, heaps and heaps and heaps of things, far more than anyone had time to count, or even to see distinctly. These are not just the things that were in the cabinets. I think these are things that were in storage as well. All the angry gentlemen had abruptly sat down on the museum steps, except the nice one. And I think I actually have this picture. Let's see. Nope, not that one. I didn't change it. No, not that one. Let's change the picture to the one that you're meant to be seeing. Otherwise we'll never get there, will we? This one here. Here's all the things coming out of the museum to where the Queen is. I think this is meant to be the bull that sat down next to her, but I don't know. But the pots and the other things, and there's the gentlemen all sitting on the steps, and there's the children and the Queen here. That would have been quite a sight. Hope no one got too hurt. All the angry gentlemen had abruptly sat down on the museum steps, except the nice one. He stood with his hands in his pockets, just as though he was quite used to seeing great stone bulls and all sorts of small Babylonish objects float out into the museum yard. But he sent a man to close the big iron gates. A journalist who was just leaving the museum spoke to Robert as he passed. "Theosophy, I suppose," he said. "Is she Mrs. Besant?" "Yes," said Robert, recklessly. The journalist passed through the gates just before they were shut. He rushed off to Fleet Street, and his paper got out a new edition within half an hour. Yes, because newspapers in those days, you'd have your first edition, which had the stuff that had been happening overnight, the news that they'd got in, and then the second edition and the subsequent ones were with updates to the same current news. So if you lived in central London, you actually could have several editions of the same newspaper, where some of the stories stay the same and other ones have been updated, or new ones put in. So they got out a new edition within half an hour. "Mrs. Besant and Theosophy, Impertinent Miracle at the British Museum," was what the headline was. People saw it in fat black letters on the boards carried by the sellers of newspapers. Some few people who had nothing better to do went down to the museum on the tops of omnibuses. So it's a double-decker bus, kind of, but probably horse-drawn. But by the time they got there was nothing to be seen, for the Babylonian queen had suddenly seen the closed gates, had felt the threat of them, and had said, "I wish we were in your house." That's probably the best wish she's made so far. And of course, instantly they were. The Psammead was furious. "Look here," it said, "they'll come after you and they'll find me. There'll be a national cage built for me at Westminster and I shall have to work at politics. Why wouldn't you leave the things in their places?" "What a temper you have, haven't you?" said the Queen serenely. "I wish all the things were back in their places. Will that do for you?" The Psammead swelled and shrank and spoke very angrily. "I can't refuse to give your wishes," it said, "but I can bite, and I will if this goes on. Now then." "Don't," whispered Anthea close to its bristling ear. "It is dreadful for us too. Don't you desert us. Perhaps she'll wish herself at home again soon." "Not she," said the Psammead with a little less temper. Sorry, I was reading it wrong, and so I had to come up with the right meaning for the words I used. "Take me to see your city," said the Queen. The children looked at each other. "If we had some money, we could take her about in a cab. People wouldn't notice her so much then, but we haven't." "Sell this," said the Queen, taking a ring from her finger. "They'd only think we had stolen it," said Cyril bitterly, "and put us in prison." "All roads lead to prison with you, it seems," said the Queen. It wasn't their fault that they were imprisoned. "The learned gentleman," said Anthea, and ran up to him with the ring in her hand. "Look here," she said, "will you buy this for £1?" "Oh," he said, in tones of joy and amazement, and took the ring into his hand. I'll just see if there's a picture to go with this. I have a feeling there may well be. There you go. There's the learned gentleman. There's Anthea. There's the learned gentleman. There's his mummy case behind him. And he is looking at the ring, which I think must be down here. I'm not sure. Because he's got his hands out, but he's looking down at the table. "Look here," she said. "Will you buy this for £1?" "Oh," he said in tones of joy and amazement, and took the ring into his hand. "It's my very own," said Anthea. "It was given to me to sell." "I'll lend you £1," he said, "with pleasure, and I'll take care of the ring for you. Who did you say gave it to you?" "We call her," said Anthea carefully, "the Queen of Babylon." "Is it a game?" he asked hopefully. "It'll be pretty game if I don't get the money to pay for cabs for her," said Anthea. "I sometimes think," he said slowly, "that I'm becoming insane. Or that I am, but I'm not, and you're not, and she's not. Does she say that she's the Queen of Babylon?" he asked uneasily. "Yes," said Anthea recklessly. "Oh dear, this thought transference is more far-reaching than I imagined," he said. "I suppose I have unconsciously influenced her too. I never thought my Babylonish studies would bear fruit like this. Horrible. There are more things in heaven and earth." "Yes," said Anthea, "heaps more. And the £1 is the thing I want more than anything on earth." He ran his fingers through his thin hair. "This thought transference," he said, "it's undoubtedly a Babylonian ring, or it seems so to me, but perhaps I have hypnotized myself. I will see a doctor the moment I have corrected the last proofs of my book." "Yes, do," said Anthea, "and thank you so very much." She took the sovereign that he gave her. So obviously a sovereign is worth about the same as £1 at the time, which was quite a bit of money, and ran down to the others. Now, sovereign, as far as I know, was a type of coin of a particular value. And now from the window of a four-wheeled cab, the Queen of Babylon beheld the wonders of London. Buckingham Palace, she thought, uninteresting. Westminster Abbey and the Houses of Parliament, little better. But she liked the Tower and the river, and the ships filled her with wonder and delight. "But how badly you keep your slaves! How wretched and poor and neglected they seem," she said as the cab rattled along the Mile End Road. They aren't slaves, they're working people, said Jane. Of course they're working. That's what slaves are. Don't you tell me. Do you suppose I don't know a slave's face when I see it? Why don't their masters see that they're better fed and better clothed? Tell me in 3 words. No one answered. The wage system of modern England is a little difficult to explain in 3 words, even if you understand it, which the children didn't. You'll have a revolt of your slaves if you're not careful, said the Queen. Oh no, said Cyril. You see, they have votes, and that makes them safe not to revolt. It makes all the difference. Father told me so. What is this vote? Asked the Queen. Is it a charm? What do they do with it? I don't know, said the harassed Cyril. It's just a vote, that's all. They don't do anything in particular with it. I see, said the Queen. A sort of plaything. Well, I wish that all these slaves may have in their hands this moment their fill of their favourite food and drink. Picture. I need to get it for you. Sorry. I didn't realise it was so soon after the other one. Oh, too far. In their hands, their favourite food and drink. There's a pie, there's a plum pudding, there's a fish and something else. She's got a goose and it looks like a mug or a cup full of something, probably gin. Back in those days, not the quality of gin that we have now, but poor people often used to drink quite a bit because that was something that they could make or get fairly cheaply. Instantly all the people in the Mile End Road and all the other streets where poor people live found their hands full of things to eat and drink. From the cab window could be seen persons carrying every kind of food, and bottles and cans as well. Roast meat, fowls, red lobsters, great yellowy crabs, fried fish, boiled pork, beefsteak puddings, baked onions, mutton pies. Most of the young people had oranges and sweets. And cake. Oranges, yes, they were imported. It made an enormous change in the look of the Mile End Road, brightened it up, so to speak, and brightened up more than you can possibly imagine the faces of the people. Makes a difference, doesn't it? Said the Queen. That's the best wish you've had yet, said Jane with cordial approval. Just by the bank, the cabman stopped. I ain't a-going to drive you no further, he said. Out you gets. They got out rather unwillingly. I wants my tea, he said, and they saw that on the box of the cab was a mound of cabbage with pork chops and apple sauce, a duck and a spotted currant pudding, also a large can. You pay me my fare, he said threateningly, and looked down at the mound, muttering again about his tea. We'll take another cab, said Cyril with dignity. Give me change for a sovereign, if you please. But the cabman, as it turned out, was not at all a nice character. He took the sovereign, whipped up his horse, and disappeared in the stream of cabs and omnibuses and wagons without giving them any change at all. Already a little crowd was collecting around the party. Come on, said Robert, leading the wrong way. The crowd around them thickened. They were in a narrow street where many gentlemen in black coats and without hats were standing about on the pavement, talking very loudly. I'm just going to have a quick scroll through and see if there's anything I can find that might be coming up that I might need to know about. I can't see anything so far. Right, carrying on. How ugly their clothes are, said the Queen of Babylon. They'd be rather fine men, some of them, if they were dressed decently, especially the ones with the beautiful long curved noses. I wish they were dressed like the Babylonians of my court, and of course it was so. The moment the almost fainting Samiad had blown itself out, every man in Throgmorton Street appeared abruptly in Babylonian full dress. All were carefully powdered, their hair and beards were scented and curled, their garments richly embroidered, they wore rings and armlets, flat gold collars and swords and impossible-looking headdresses. A stupefied silence fell on them. I say, said a youth who had always been fair-haired, who broke the silence. It's only fancy, of course, something wrong with my eyes, but you chaps do look so rum. Rum, said his friend. Look at you in a sash. My hat! And your hair's gone black, and you've got a beard. It's my belief we've been poisoned. You do look a jackanape. Old Levenstein doesn't look so bad, but how was it done? That's what I want to know. How was it done? Is it conjuring or what? I think it's just a very bad dream, said old Levenstein to his clerk. All along Bishopsgate I have seen the common people have their hands full of food, good food. Oh yes, without a doubt. Very bad dream. Because in his mind, poor people don't have enough money for all this wonderful food. Then I'm dreaming it too, sir, said the clerk, looking down at his legs with an expression of loathing. I see my feet in beastly sandals as plain as plain. All that good food wasted, said old Mr. Levenstein. A bad dream, a bad dream. The members of the Stock Exchange are said to be at all times a noisy lot. So I'm thinking that that's who these people are. But the noise they made now to express their disgust at the costumes of ancient Babylon was far louder than their ordinary row. One had to shout before one could hear oneself speak. I only wish, said the clerk, who thought it was conjuring. He was quite close to the children, and they trembled because they knew that whatever he wished would come true. I only wish we knew who'd done it. And of course, instantly, they did know, and they pressed round the Queen. Scandalous, shameful, ought to be put down by law, give her in charge, fetch the police! 2 or 3 voices shouted at once. The Queen recoiled. What is it? She asked. They sound like caged lions. Lions by the 1,000. What is it that they say? They say police, said Cyril briefly. I knew they would sooner or later, and I don't blame them, mind you. I wish my guards were here, cried the Queen. The exhausted Samiad was panting and trembling, but the Queen's guards in red and green garments and brass and iron gear choked Throgmorton Street and bared weapons, flashing round the Queen. I'm mad, said Mr. Rosenbaum. That's what it is, mad. It's a judgment on you, Rosie, said his partner. I always said you were too hard in that matter of flower dew. It's a judgment, and I'm in it too. The members of the Stock Exchange had edged carefully away from the gleaming blades, the mailed figures, the hard, harsh eastern faces. But Throgmorton Street is narrow, and the crowd was too thick for them to get away as quickly as they wished. Kill them, cried the Queen. Kill the dogs! The guards obeyed. It is all a dream, said Mr. Levenstein, cowering in a doorway behind his clerk. It isn't, said the clerk. It isn't. Oh, my goodness gracious, those foreign brutes are killing everybody. Henry Hirsch is down now, and Prentice is cut into, oh, Lord and heart, and there goes Lionel Cohen with his head cut off, and Guy Nichols has lost his head now. A dream? I wish to goodness it was all a dream. And, of course, instantly it was. The entire Stock Exchange rubbed its eyes and went back to close, to over, and either side of 7/8, and trunks, and Kaffirs, and steel common, and contangos, and backwardations, and double options, and all the interesting subjects concerning which they talk in the street without ceasing, most of which I have no idea what they're talking about. No one said a word about it to anyone. I think I have explained before that businessmen do not like it to be known that they have been dreaming in business hours, especially mad dreams, including such dreadful things as hungry people getting dinner and the destruction of the Stock Exchange. The children were in the dining room at 300 Fitzroy Street, pale and trembling. The Samiad crawled out of the embroidered bag and lay flat on the table, its legs stretched out, looking more like a dead hare than anything else. Thank goodness that's over, said Anthea, drawing a deep breath. She won't come back, will she? Said Jane tremulously. No, said Cyril, she's thousands of years ago, but we spent a whole precious £1 on her. It'll take all our pocket money for ages to pay that back. Yes, because it was a loan. Not if it was all a dream, said Robert. The wish said all a dream, you know. Panther, you cut up and ask if he lent you anything. Panther's the nickname for Anthea. I beg your pardon, said Anthea politely, following the sound of her knock into the presence of the learned gentleman. I'm so sorry to trouble you, but did you lend me £1 today? No, he said, looking kindly at her through his spectacles, but it's extraordinary that you should ask me, for I dozed for a few moments this afternoon, a thing I rarely do, and I dreamt quite distinctly that you brought me a ring that you said belonged to the Queen of Babylon, and that I lent you a sovereign, and that you left one of the Queen's rings here. The ring was a magnificent specimen. He sighed. I wish it hadn't been a dream, he said, smiling. He was really learning to smile quite nicely. Anthea could not be too thankful that the Psammead was not there to grant his wish. And that's the end of the chapter, and I'm sorry, but that's the end of today's reading, because I have other things I have to go and do. Yes, sorry about that, but it's so wonderful you can be here. The next chapter, just to give you a little bit of a teaser, is called Atlantis. Oh, so what's going to happen? We've had the Queen of Babylon coming to London for what is the current time for the children, and all sorts of disaster. And then it's rescued by someone wishing that it was just a dream. That's just as well they did. Atlantis. That one's got me puzzled. I mean, I was a little bit puzzled about the previous one too, when it talked about the Queen. But I did think it quite possibly could have meant the Queen of Babylon. But this one isn't. So I'm not sure. We'll find out. Anyway, so we'll see you next time. I'm looking forward to finding out what the next part of the story is about. And in the meantime, go to the link that's below and check out the different codex readers. So you've got Soft Spoken. He's the chap who was here in chat earlier on today. You've also got Glacier Nesta as another one who's reasonably in the early stages of their Twitch establishment. So both of those chaps, it would be wonderful if you could go and follow them. They'd really appreciate it. And listen to them when they're reading story. Even if you're doing something else but you've got your Twitch open, have a good listen to them. So I know that they're not both here, but I'm just going to put their links here anyway. So there's Ken's one, Soft Spoken, and also Glacier Nesta. I think that's the correct one. Yes, it came up, so it must be the right one. So follow both of those guys. Listen to them when they're reading. Get involved with their chat. Get to know them. Be supportive of them, because it's a fairly new journey for them in some ways. And it would be really cool to encourage them to just sort of keep going and keep going with the reading and just being part of the whole community of public domain readers. And then otherwise, check out the rest of the codex readers, which are in the link below on my Twitch page. And if you're watching this on YouTube, follow the link to my Twitch page and then scroll down until you see codex. And then there's a list of links there of people you can follow. And then also for those who are on Twitch, I'm going to give you my Discord link. No, I'm going to give you the codex Discord link. You don't need my one. There's a link there for those of you who are on Twitch. You can go and join the Codex Discord, and it's not just for the people who do the reading who are part of Codex. It's for anyone who's interested in that sort of stuff. Not necessarily the reading, but listening to reading. There's a book club, there's a movie club, there's all that sort of stuff. So go and join Codex and say hi, say Jev sent you. Just get involved with the community there. Encourage the others who are there as well. Great bunch of people. We all read public domain books, or ones that we have express permission from the authors or the publishers. One of the others reads from books that they are writing themselves. You might get in ahead of everybody else before the book's published and actually hear pieces of books that other people haven't heard unless they're in the stream. All sorts of possibilities. Go and find out who these people are and get to know them. In the meantime, I look forward to seeing you next time I read, which will be for me in 2 days' time. So that will be Wednesday. I read 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 3 p.m. New Zealand time. And if you look at my Twitch schedule, it will show you the time for your time zone. Excellent, isn't it? If you're on YouTube, then subscribe to my channel. It doesn't cost you anything. YouTube will tell you when I put up a new video, and I will have my videos into playlists for each book. If you're on Twitch, follow me on Twitch. That's pressing the heart-shaped button, and Twitch will notify you when I go live. And then come on over and get involved with the chat. Find out about things, discover aspects of history and places that you've not come across before. Just different, things that are different. There's nothing wrong with finding out about stuff that's different to the world that you currently live in. So I look forward to seeing you next time. In the meantime, happy reading and bye.